so we are back. We are talking about decimal fractions. Today we're talking about rounding decimal fractions using a place value chart, using a vertical number line, and this is just going to kind of help us visualize how to round decimals, and more specifically when decimals aren't so obvious. So we're going to start with some easy ones, and then we're going to move on. I'm going to do a decimal one, and then hopefully that gives you a good understanding. Remember, you could always rewind, and you can watch some of the other videos to get some of the terminology too, because we're going to be talking about unit form, and we talked about unit form, expanded form, and standard form in a previous video, so go check that one out. Alright, so let's get started. So here's our a place value chart, and the first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to break down or decompose the number 155. We're going to decompose it, and we want to round it. Let me do it in a different color. So round to the nearest tens, and hundreds. So we're gonna do two. That's what we're working on right now. So first one, rounding to the nearest tens. We want to decompose the numbers. We want to break it down. The first way that we can break down is break it down to its unit form. And in that case, 100, or 5 tens and 5 ones. So we can just write that in here and break it down that way. Now, if we want to break this down further, we can think, well, what is the one that is going to give us the most amount of tens? Well, in that case, that would be 15. If we went any further than 15, we wouldn't have our number anymore because we'd have 165, right, if we had 16. So in this case, it's 15 and 5, and then we can also break it down as ones. So there's 155 ones, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Now, let's break this down. The first one that we want to do, let's get a different color up in here. So the first one that we're going to do is we're rounding to the tens, right? So here's tens. We're going to round to the tens place. And in this case, we're going to use a number line. So it's going to help us better visualize this, I hope. And that's my goal. Now, when we're doing this, what I want to stress is to make sure we want to figure out what is the closest number. And since we're talking about tens, we're thinking of the next set of tens. So if it's 15, the next set's going to be 16. So we're trying to figure out, should we round it down to 15 or up to 16, okay? And so in this case, because there are 15, right, 15 tens, this is our low end, all right? So there are 15 tens, which is 150, and it's in between 16 as well, 16 tens, which is 160. So we got to figure out which it's closer to, right? What's our number closest to? And in this case, the best one to kind of really look at is this row right here, because we have 15 and 5 ones, and that kind of gives us that visual or that understanding that this number right here is 15 tens plus 5 ones, and that equals 155, right? And so when we see that, we can see that because it's exactly halfway in between, when it's halfway, so 5 or more, we're always going to round up. So it's going to round up here, and this is going to be our answer. So when we're rounding to the tens, this is our answer. Now, what happens if we're rounding to the hundreds? Okay, so if we're rounding to the hundreds, again, we break down our number. There we go, there we go. Same way as we did before. 155 ones. Let me write that so it doesn't look like an S. 155. And now, so we break it down again. And so now we're going to ask ourselves, well, how many hundreds are there? Because here is our question. Boom. And now we're focusing on hundreds. So there's 100. So what's the next hundreds up? That's what we want to ask ourselves. Well, the next hundreds up, there's 100 here, down here, and are we going to round it down, or are we going to round it up? Because the next one is 200, and we're asking ourselves, which one do we round to? which one do we round? Do we round to? So the first step I'm going to say is, well, what's halfway? Halfway is going to be uh, 15 tens, right? Halfway is going to be 15 tens, because really this is like 100, or the way we can look at it, instead of 15 tens, we can look at it as, maybe this will be better if we look at it like this, since we're dealing with hundreds, is 105 tens, because we would need 5 more to get to 100. So 100 plus 5 tens would be halfway, which is equal to 150. Now if we look at our number, we can look at our number here. Our number is 155, which means that it is above the halfway point. So what are we going to round to? We're going to round up. And so our answer is going to be 200. And so that's kind of the idea that we're going with today. And so when we break this next one down, and I get rid of these, this will kind of give you the idea that we're going for, and this should help you with the rest of the work. Alright, so let's take a look at 1.57. And we're going to break this down, and I want to round to the nearest whole, and I want to round to the nearest 10. Okay, the nearest tenth is what I want to round to in this case, and then I'll show you the whole one. So we're going to start with tenth. So in this case, oops, let's not do that. I'm just going to point to it. So we're rounding to here, and I want you to decompose it first. So we start with its basic form: 1, 1, 5 tens or tenths, and 7 hundredths, right? And then we could also break it down as 15 tenths. I'm sorry. 15 tenths and 7 hundredths, or we can just break it down as 157 hundredths, right? So if we break it down like that, we've decomposed it. Decompose means to break down. So now we come back and we say, okay, how does this look like on the number line? Well, in this case, since we're dealing with tenths, we want to start with the lowest amount of tenths, which is 15, right? Or the highest in our number, but it's the lower number on the totem pole, because we want to know if we want to round up or down. So there's 15 and 15 tenths, right, which is equal to 1.5, right, or 1.50, depending on how you look at it. And then the next one up would be 16, because it goes 15 to 16. So 16 tenths would look like this, and then we would get 1.60. Now our question is, this is 157, right, or 1.57, or we can look at it as 15 tenths and 5 hundredths. 5 hundredths, so it's halfway between, or I'm sorry, it's not 5 hundredths. 5 hundredths would be halfway. That's what I'm getting at. Hundredths would be halfway, and we want to ask ourselves, this is halfway. This is the halfway point. Anything past here is going to go up. Anything below here is going to go round down. So in this case, it's 157 or 1.57, and we are going to round up. So our answer is going to be 1.6. So this rounds to 1.6 if we round to the tenths place, which is our second number. Now if we're rounding to the whole, it's just a little different, because if we round to the whole number, that means we're looking at the ones place. Okay, so if we're rounding to the whole number, I want to look at the ones place, not the tens. So I'm looking at here, and in this case, we write it down. It's a 1, there's 1, 1, and then the next one would be 2 ones, and that equals 2. This one equals 1. What's halfway in between? That would be 1, 1, and 5 tenths, okay, which equals 1.5. We got to ask ourselves, well, if it's past here, anything past here is going to go up, anything below there is going to go down. It's going to round down, so we would round to 1 or round up to 2. In this case, it's 157, 1.50 there. This is 1.57, we are going to round up. So if we round to the whole, it's 2. So I hope that kind of clarifies rounding. I really like this vertical line. I think it really helps. So give it a go, see what you come up with.